All right, and in this video we're going to model something called stagflation. Okay, so stagflation is a big problem that happened in the 1970s and 1980s, and we're going to use our basic model to model this. Now, we're going to, again, just to remind you, we're using the same assumptions as we did in the previous two videos. So the assumption is that we start at a long-run equilibrium. The second assumption is that the government is not taking a specific policy to solve this problem. So we're going to see what this model would predict will happen naturally. And then the third thing is we're going to show this with no long-run growth. Now, I might do one future video just to show you the complication that it adds if we do add in long-run growth, but I'm not going to do that yet. Okay, so we're starting in our equilibrium here, starting a long-run equilibrium. And we got aggregate demand going here. Okay, so we got our aggregate demand here. Okay, we're all set. So starting in our long-run equilibrium, we can just call this A. And then what happens? So what happens is first thing, we have a big increase in input costs. Okay, so with stagflation, we have a supply shock. So what is a supply shock? Well, a supply shock is a very large increase. So this is a large increase in input costs. In the 1970s and 1980s, this was the price of oil. So it's got to be an input which is across the board in a country. So it's got to usually be something like energy. There's some theory. There's some scenarios where you could think of this as labor. But it would have to take something major, like a major war, something along the lines where you had a sudden shortage of labor that caused wages to go really, really high, something like this. But mainly we think of this as energy costs. Typically, we're thinking of this as cost of oil. Okay, so it's usually is the price of oil. Okay, so what effect this has? Well, this has the effect of causing a decrease in the short-run aggregate supply. So costs go up and the firms start to cut back these prices. So we go to here, we end up at this equilibrium at B. Okay, so let's write this down. So, well, now we're going along for the consumers. We're moving kind of along their aggregate demand curve. So we're moving in between here. So we get the rising. Remember, that was the whole point of the slope of aggregate demand. So the rising price level is going to cause changes to the aggregate demand. So this causes less consumption, less investment, and less net exports. And the three reasons, if you want to go back and review them, we had the three reasons we had the wealth effect, we had the interest rate effect, and we had the foreign price effect. Sometimes the foreign price effect is shown as exchange rate effect. Okay, so this is along the aggregate demand curve. Okay, so this is going on, and we get this. So we end up at B. So at B we have two problems. So we end up at this point B, and there's two problems. We got an increase in the price level. Well, I guess we have three problems. We got a decrease in the output, and we got an increase in our unemployment rate. Right. So these problems is called stagflation. So the name stagflation, so this is stagflation. Stagflation is stagnation, which is kind of in the idea of recession, plus inflation. Right, that's where this name stagflation comes from. And so with our stagflation, we have a double problem. So we have typically in the two we showed before, we only had one problem. We either had a recession and high unemployment, or we had inflation. Here we have a recession and we have inflation. Okay, so we have both these things going on at the same time. And so what's going to happen in the long run? So this is if the government was to do nothing. Even if the government does something, it's actually kind of a tricky problem to solve, as we'll find later. But in the long run, either they would wait and eventually the oil price would fall. So either the input price would fall, like oil. So eventually, hopefully, this price goes down, and then we would go back to the original, or wages and other costs adjust down. Okay, and then when that happens, we go. When that happens, we'd see a decrease in the short run. Sorry, we see an increase in the short run area supply back to the original, back to our original one. Okay, so this has to happen, and so we will go, and eventually we're back to A, right? So back to Y equals potential GDP. That's the idea. Now, again, the same question as we had with the recession. The big question is, how long would this take? So if we go back from, if we did nothing and we go back from B to A pretty fast, then maybe this isn't such a big deal and we should just wait and let it take its natural course. If going back from B to A will take a very long time and we're going to have an output gap, remember this idea of the output gap, I probably should have mentioned it to you again. So we got this output gap, right? And so we have high unemployment, we have unused resources, and if this is going to go on for a long time, then the government and the central bank may want to come in and do something, right? So this is kind of a philosophical, not philosophical, it really depends on how fast this adjustment is. And that's why the speed of adjustment is such an important issue in macroeconomics. So anyways, we could leave it alone in the future part of the course in a couple weeks from now, or at least a couple series of videos later if you're just watching this online. We're going to see that there are things the government can do, but in this case they're kind of in a no-win situation. The two things they can do, one of them will make the recession worse and the other one will make the inflation worse. Okay, so but let's save that for the future. Right now I don't want to talk anything about the policies that they can use. Okay, so that concludes this one. In the further video, I may come and show how this relates to some real-world situations rather than just these predictions from our model.